General business, notice number 4, standing in the name of J. Davis, to move a motion concerning a select committee on pathways for children and young people.
Member for Johnston.
Got deja vu, Mr Deputy Speaker. Mr Deputy Speaker, I move that this Assembly notes that on the 16th of October 2024, the Deputy Chief Minister and Minister for Corrections moved the Criminal Code Amendment Bill 2024 be read for a second time, stating that one purpose of the bill was ensuring that 10 and 11-year-old children who commit offences have appropriate rehabilitation that will provide them an opportunity to turn their young lives around. Notes that the vital responsibility that this government owes to all children and young people in the Territory, including a responsibility under Section 4B of the Youth Justice Act 2005, to ensure that young people who commit offences are dealt with in a way that acknowledges their needs and will provide them with the opportunity to develop in socially responsible ways. Also notes the vital responsibility that this government owes to all Territorian children and young people, police, corrections officers, judges and justices, including a responsibility under Section 4C and 81(6) of the Youth Justice Act 2005 to provide them with appropriate alternatives to detention and imprisonment. 2, therefore, establishes a select committee on pathways for children and young people to inquire and report on the alternatives to detention and imprisonment available to police, corrections officers, judges and justices when dealing with 10 and 11-year-old offenders, additional pathways needed to help police, corrections officers, judges and justices prevent reoffending and provide children with opportunities to make safer, more responsible choices with the support of meaningful and engaging programs. The committee will comprise 3 government, 1 opposition and 2 crossbench members to be nominated by the relevant whip or crossbench member to the Speaker in writing, and the committee is to report by the first sitting day 6 months after the passing of this motion. Mr Deputy Speaker, for people who were very committed to having a motion like this before the House, and I note that, that this motion was one that I wrote at the end of last year. I have to say very clearly, and I wasn't expecting it to come up today, I know that the government has said that they have an intention to amend the Youth Justice Act. I know that the content of this motion may be affected by that amendment, and I'm regretful that I haven't had the opportunity to see what those changes might be before we talk about this amendment. Nevertheless, the intention of this amendment, the intention of this motion, not amendment, is that we find ways to work together as a parliament to make sure that we can actually address in a more effective way the issues that are facing our young people who come into contact with our criminal justice system. Everyone in this chamber, and we have all talked about it, everyone's concerned about community safety and everyone is concerned about our children. We all know that we have a shared responsibility to make sure that the children in the Territory, we look after them, we care for them, we give them alternatives so that they don't end up on a pathway that is not the pathway that we all want. And so the intention of this motion is that we do find ways to work together to actually identify what those alternatives might be. The alternatives that are going to keep all of us safe, including children and young people safe, into the long term and into the future. Mr Deputy Speaker, I've had the opportunity with my fellow crossbench members to visit the Holt's, I'm not sure what it's called, Holt's Youth Prison. I'm not sure of the correct terminology, and to see what's happening there. I think we all know that, well, I won't say that. I certainly believe that all the evidence shows that locking up people does not work, that it makes them harms them, damages them, and the younger that young people come into contact with the criminal justice system, the more likely it is that they're going to go down a pathway of ongoing engagement with that system, and that's not what any of us want. So what we do know is that there are many, many alternatives. There are many things that we can do very differently and I believe much more effectively. We've heard, I've only had the privilege of being in the chamber of with the member for Mulka since October last year, but I know other people, this is now his 9th year, and I know many other people have heard him speak before about alternative pathways, about ways to work with young children that are actually going to make a difference, to work with elders and work with communities so that we can address both what is causing crime or causing problems and move forward to create a safe community, a safe future, and to bring these children up in a way that is they can contribute to society, they can be strong, they can be healthy, and they can be part of the world that we all want. So I think we absolutely need to find ways to work together and accept the invitation that the member for Mulka graciously puts on the table over and over again, to listen to elders, to listen to and work with the people who know what is going to work, to make sure that we stop this terrible tragedy that's happening in the Northern Territory. It's just, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to hear what's happening here. People in this chamber are telling stories all the time about the crime in their communities, what they're facing, talking a lot about young people. What we're doing is not working. I think the CLP has said that very clearly, and this government has come in and said we're going to do something different. That's our mandate. I agree we need to do something different. People will have heard me say this over and over again. I have not seen any evidence anywhere. I've worked around conflict, around the justice space with young people for more than 4 decades. I've studied it. I've got 2 masters working around justice. I know a lot about this. I've never seen any evidence anywhere that locking up children is going to do anything to make any of us safer, and it's certainly not going to do anything to make them safer. So this motion calls on all of us to say, let's work out what's actually going to work. Let's do something that's smart. Let's do something that can both meet what the community is calling for, what the CLP describes as their mandate, and what we all really care about, which is the future of our territory, which is the future that is held in our children. I know, Madam Speaker, that there's limited time tonight. I feel I'd be very disappointed if we didn't have a chance to vote on and move on this motion tonight. I'm just putting that out there to the floor. So I'm going to stop speaking now and see if anyone else would like to speak. But I would really encourage people that this motion is about us finding ways to work together, to find alternatives, to do what we all want here. So I'd invite all of you, encourage all of you to support the motion. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Drysdale.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Member for Johnston, for bringing this to the House. I have very strong views on youth crime, and it won't be a surprise to the chamber that they are very counter to those of the member for Johnston. However, I will outline my position for why I'll oppose this bill, and I want to give it the respect it deserves, but I will read out, to start tonight, I want to read out a letter sent to me by Lewis, who is a man who lives in my electorate. He is a very good man, that is what I can say about him. And when I read you this letter, I hope you all see a bit of insight into why our government is doing what it is doing. So this is a letter from a constituent to myself, titled "No More Excuses." I grew up in hell. My mother chased drugs and abusive men from state to state, dragging me with her. I was locked out of the house most days, left to wander the streets while she got high or passed out. Each new partner took a turn abusing me. I had no safety, no love, no reason to believe things would ever get better. By the time I was 14, we were back in Victoria. I had a few mates by then, and one night I went to a party. My best friend Brenton was outside, said he was going to fight someone. I followed him like any young kid would. We got to the house, he went to the door, and next thing I heard was screaming. I tried to get him out, but people pinned me down. When I got up, he was running toward me, bleeding out. He said nothing, he just collapsed at my feet. I held him a while as he died, a 14-year-old kid holding his best mate's body while he bled out. After that, my mum left me, just gone. No goodbye, no care. I was on my own. I stole anything I could just to survive. I got arrested and did time in Parkville. And here's what changed me. Sitting in that cell, I could hear the fucking zoo. Families laughing, kids having fun. Life was going on out there while I sat locked away. And it hit me. This isn't living, this is wasting. When I got out, I had no support, no money, no experience. No one cared. But I convinced my mum to move to Perth with me. I started working shitty little jobs, sales stuff, anything. I taught myself how to be a human being, how to show up, how to survive without hurting people. Now I'm 32. I'm a qualified mechanic. I've got 3 daughters who I love more than anything. I'm not perfect, but I'm present. I've broken the cycle. So when I see crime happening now, especially in places like the NT, I don't want to hear excuses. Don't tell me these kids are just troubled. Don't tell me they've had a hard life. So did I. But I didn't bash old ladies. I didn't break into homes. I didn't stab strangers for fun. And I sure as hell didn't think I could get away with it. That's the problem right now. They think they can get away with it, because most of the time they do. No real consequences, no accountability. And the rest of us, normal people just trying to live, have to suffer for it. Enough is enough. I'm not a community figure. I'm not looking for praise or pity. I'm just a bloke who lived it. And I'm telling you, you can be tough on crime and still care about people. But right now, all I see is a system that's failing both. You want to make a difference, start with the truth. There is no excuse for hurting innocent people. There is no excuse for doing nothing while it keeps getting worse. Do something. Now, I find that an incredible and moving letter, Madam Speaker. And I know Lewis very well. He said he's not a community man, but he is. And he is present at the school. His daughters, he has 3 amazing, beautiful daughters who are an absolute credit to him and his partner. I read that story out because at its core, what changed the projection of Lewis's life was a term of imprisonment as a child. And it can be hard to hear, because when we hear the word child, it conjures up in our minds pictures of innocent children playing in parks. And that would be the ideal world. But unfortunately, it's just not the truth. Prior to my army career, Madam Speaker, I was a youth worker, and I was a youth worker for the worst of the worst. I worked with boys who had committed serious and violent crime. And I can assure you, when you hear the word child and in your mind you think of an innocent kid playing in the park, when we talk about custody for children, there are crimes that have been committed and there's a victim behind it, like a rape victim. Because yes, a child can rape, and I know because I've worked with them. Yes, a child can hit with an axe, and I know because I've worked with them. I've lived this experience, Madam Speaker. Justice is not vengeance. Our government doesn't set out to seek vengeance. The idea of custody is to create, it's a moral framework for our society. I think the evidence showed, with years of trying the soft approach that I myself worked in, where we had programs after programs, we had huge amounts of funding for programs and programs, it did not work. The best outcomes I ever saw was following a stint in juvie with the young boys I worked with. I also saw them the happiest they had ever been because they were achieving for the first time in their life. My role as a youth worker was a residential live-in role. I lived with these boys. And when they're on the street, I can assure you there's very little self-pride. But visiting them in juvie when they're attending school, they're playing in a sports team, they're showing me their artwork and the things they've achieved for the first time, and they're getting praise for the first time. It's actually an incredible thing to be a part of. And they're also learning that what they did was wrong. And that's a key part of what our measures in reducing the age has done. I completely understand the image people conjure up. How could we do this to 10 and 11-year-olds? These aren't the 10 and 11-year-olds playing at the swing, Madam Speaker. That is the point. There are victims behind these crimes. And so we have an individual who, because of the environment, there's the nature and nurture side of this. And I can say, yes, I worked with boys who had a good nature to them. And they were brought up in the most horrible environment, which turned them to crime, to violent crime, or to do acts they wouldn't have done had they had the upbringing most of us had. Those boys are the ones I have the most hope for, and it's custody and that change in which I had the most hope of them ever getting. I didn't have them hope in staying in the programs we were doing. I had to leave it. So the Chamber knows I left that job because I fundamentally believed we were actually doing more harm when a boy came to us. There are also, on the nature front, we have to accept that some people, Madam Speaker, there can be just an evil streak. And it's not just in the streets, they can wear a suit just like this. But some people are just inclined that way. And we have to protect wider society. So, whilst I do hold hopes for most people that commit violent crime, we have to face the fact that not everybody can be rehabilitated, especially by the later years. And unfortunately, so unfortunately, 10, 11 for some people is too late, which is why we're focusing so hard on the primary school and trying to get kids back into primary school. And some people might find these comments I've made confronting or, might think there's something to make of it, but it's facing reality. We have to face reality, and we have to protect our community from those that will continue to do harm. I don't believe true care is permissiveness. And so that is why, for the most severe offences, there has to be an aspect of custody. I also believe the failure to act, Madam Speaker, ensures we create predators. the failure to act when young people start going wayward, we ensure we create predators tomorrow. And Madam Speaker, I won't stand in this place and create predators for the future tomorrow that my daughters will have to face. So I think something we would all agree with is that how do we turn those predators into protectors, into the role that they should uptake in society? I'm talking heavily from a male perspective. It is my background. This does affect young women as well. And the same rules apply for them. So how do we turn the predators of today into protectors of tomorrow? Well, we have to start by making sure there's no more victims. So we have to start by removing them from society to protect the community now. And that's a non-negotiable for me, Madam Speaker. And I understand that can be hard for some people to swallow, but it is a non-negotiable. I have a wife, I have children, I have aging parents. I will not allow people who are willing to commit violent and sexually violent offences be free in our community. Then we must teach that there is a consequence. There is an educational process itself in the act of custody, in learning that you have done something wrong and therefore society will respond accordingly. We do this in our own homes. We do this with our own children. If a child, we do it in our school systems. So if my children are misbehaving, they get a timeout, Madam Speaker. Schools can use detentions or suspensions. So I don't know why it is when we get to the state level, these ideas break down. The state should be implementing things in accordance with human nature and the simple act of, in a good family home, we will discipline with love, because I fundamentally believe discipline is a form of love. I don't go discipline random children in Coles. I'll discipline my children because I love them and I want them to grow up and be successful members of society. And so we do it in our home, and the state, it should be reflected in policy of the state. Those same things. And I've said before, I think the state is a blunt instrument for any of these social things. However, the hard reality is, for some of these children, there has been no discipline and there has been no love in the home. And to show the extent of that, when I spoke of this earlier, and I know the member for Goyja laughed at me for saying families commit crimes together. The violent acts incidents I just spoke of occurred with a boy I worked with who was given the axe by his father and his uncle as they committed a robbery. So this boy grew up in an environment where his father and uncle handed him an axe to rob a service station. That is the reality that some children face. So we are left with this very difficult question of what to do. And it is a very difficult question. And they have had the hardest way into the world, and unfortunately, and this is just the fact of it, unfortunately for that child, there needs to be more suffering for them to achieve their full potential in our society. Because it is through that they can learn to be the protector. They can learn that what they have been taught is wrong. I see at the core too on this topic, and as it ties into the domestic violence and the family violence we see throughout the Northern Territory, the role of masculinity in our society, and this is something I care deeply about, and men's health in of itself. I fundamentally believe masculinity, along with femininity, are virtuous things. They are both virtuous things, and those two words only mean good. And they reflect all the good things that come in the way of nurturing and role modelling and protecting the innocent. So I'm a fundamental believer that we need to teach men what is masculinity and what it means to be a man. Because committing acts of violence against the innocent, to me, is not masculine. To me, that is not the actions of a man. I don't believe in a thing as called toxic masculinity. I simply reject that in its entirety. And I feel for the boys growing up in an age where they hear words like this. And where are their role models? Well, I'd say to them, embrace your masculinity, learn what your strength is for. Your strength is for protection. That is what it is for, and it is to do no harm. We have seen great grounds in what our young girls can achieve in this country. And as a father, as a very, very proud girl dad, Madam Speaker, I'm truly glad I bring my girls into a world where they have so many opportunities. And I can just look to my own workplace and they can see a chief minister, a leader of the opposition, and a speaker of the House. They can all look to and see how limitless the options are in the Northern Territory. But I feel an unintended consequence of the great progress we've made for women has been to forget our young men. And I do believe it's an unintended consequence of it. And I think we need to come back to showing, especially our boys and our men, their role in society. I do believe, as a former soldier, Madam Speaker, I also reject that there is no place ever for violence. And that might seem controversial, but I would say to a young man, there is. And it is in the protection of the innocent. I would say to a man, when you see domestic violence occurring, that is your time to step up to the plate. When your country needs you in a time of war, that is when you step up to the plate. And it is teaching the value of discipline in how they use their mind and body. And I think with greater education and role modelling for our young men, it could do a lot of good in how they enter society and the type of men that exist, especially for the age of when my daughters become women, Madam Speaker. I would like there to be as many good men in the world as we can possibly make.
Member for Drysdale, we've just hit 7 o'clock. Would you like to conclude your comments?
Does that wrap it up?
I think it wraps it up quite nicely.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yeah.
So that concludes general business for this evening.